The Boy. The day before, Seth Fallon limped toward town under a boiled blue sky, a dry wind trailing him from the fields. Despite the heat, he wore a long oilcloth coat he'd taken from the mudroom, and inside the coat, he had the 12-gauge his father had given him last Christmas, with the promise they would hunt whitetail in the swamp come fall. Earlier that morning, he had taken the shotgun into the shop, clasped it in a vise, and sawed off precisely 7 inches. Then he sanded down the bore, oiled the barrel, shined it with a rag, and leaned the gun against the door, so he could tidy what mess he had made, discarding the sawn barrel in the trash and sweeping steel scrapings from the concrete floor. He hung the saw back on its hook, folded the cloth in a neat square, and stored it with the gun oil in a metal cabinet. When he left, everything was in its place, just as his father had raised him to do. Barely a scratch of rain had fallen in 2 months the Saturday afternoon he set out for town. A summer of drought baked the crops in the furrows, leaving whole rows sere and stunted, so that the wind gnawed at what remained, and lifted a fine scrim of topsoil from the fields and flung it against the outbuildings. He walked with this wind under a sun that was a cinder in a vacant sky, the gun cool against his ribs. The farthest he had ever traveled from this valley was across the state border to Sioux Falls. This was the only home he had ever known. The town of Lone Mountain perched along terraced streets overlooking the surrounding valley, a half-mile wide and thickly wooded on either side. For eons, the Minnesota River had been at work eating through topsoil toward the Earth's core, carving out this place from vast prairie farmlands stretching hundreds of miles all around. The valley had been a place of both shadow and shelter for generations of Indians, the Cheyenne, the Fox and Sauk, the Dakotas, all who came to hide from the winter winds on the prairie. Only the ghosts of the Indians remained, but these were potent ghosts with no love for the Germans who had stolen their land following a summer of war 100 years before. And when a little girl drowned in the river, the old-timers crossed themselves and thought of the brown hands that surely pulled her under. They later said such a ghost moved in the boy, an angry spirit urging him on. Such darkness could not have come from one of their own. They had lived here for generations after traveling across the Atlantic, but still felt like sojourners.